Hello, good morning and welcome to Sunday Gardening on BBC Radio Kent with Andy Garland and Steve Bradley. After another week of very high winds here in the county, is your garden looking a bit...
BBC Radio Kent Sunday Gardening. Call with your gardening queries on 08459 81.
As part of BBC 3 O'Clock, we thought we'd repeat something we did on the show a year ago when East Kent tree surgeon Mark Jones joined us in the studio to take your questions and provide some expert advice with Steve on the issue of big mature trees, something, Steve, we have a lot of questions on the programme.
Yes, it is. And the way you keep going on about my age, I suppose I'm better qualified than Mark to talk about old trees, aren't I?
Well, I didn't like to mention it. We thought it prudent to tackle your questions on big mature trees, either growing in your garden or adjacent to your property. Those trees might not be owned by you. They might be owned by other householders. They might be owned by the council or even a local business. But if our anecdotal conversations are anything to go by, trees cause you more worry and stress than probably any other garden plant.
Yes, I think they probably do. Mainly because people... Well, for a start, trees, they're very permanent. They're probably one of the most permanent things in a garden. And they're often taken for granted, which is a real shame. But when they develop problems, for a start, people tend to underestimate the size and the scale of the problem. And often the size and scale of the tree. The number of times you hear of somebody say, "Oh, I'll get the ladder up and I'll cut that branch off," and you get up there and what looks like a small branch from down on the ground, it's thicker than your leg, and you get up there and you think, wait a minute, this is a bit too manly for me, you know.
East Kent tree surgeon Mark Jones is nodding sagely as Steve talks. Mark, welcome back to the show. Great to have you in.
Morning, Andy. Well, thank you.
How's business been since, because you were here practically exactly a year ago here on the programme, and of course since then, of course, we've been in recession, people have been in difficult financial times. How's business been for you?
It's been a very hard year. We've had less work, I think, but we've had to work harder for it, and we've just concentrated on the core business, basically. So we're still in there, we're still going away, and we're still getting a lot of good customers and doing a lot of good tree work.
Tell us a bit about your core business. What does that involve?
Basically, the core business is private customers and the sort of semi-commercial and business customers throughout the county, really. We've sort of spread further afield, working wherever the work is. And we generally tend to like the bigger trees because obviously they have a more of an impact, and my guys specifically have a great aptitude for doing a really good job on a tree, making it look really nice. Are
you still hands-on yourself?
Yeah, to try and get out probably about once every 2 or 3 weeks with the lads to try and give them a hand, but with the recession the way it's been, I've been more or less fighting for the work and seeing customers every day.
Do you find that you tend to go out on the fine days?
No, I've been out on the bad days. I know where you're coming from.
We've got phone calls and emails coming in for Mark, 08459 811111. We mentioned this walnut tree on the allotment, Mark, a few minutes ago, and Steve thought you might just have a thought on that. It was the bark seemed to be peeling on one side. Obviously, we don't have a photo of it, so we can't say. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it might have been a compost heap on the side of it, or a small bonfire that might have caused the damage that wouldn't show up straight away. Would appear later on. So the history of what the site's doing will probably help. But yeah, it's very hard to describe something like that without actually seeing it and knowing the history of what's occurred.
The other thing I thought about as well, Mark, is that normally if you've got, say, the north side of the tree damaged, or showing that sort of damage, look at the roots going out from that side of the tree, because it can be, as Mark pointed out, with something like a compost heap. If the roots have been damaged, it will transfer up into the stem on that side. In the same way that if we hurt our left leg, it hurts up the left side. There is a correlation there, and they might be able to just trace it back and say, yes, we had a compost heap there, or we poured something down there, maybe some bleach or a chemical container was washed out or whatever. Normally, if you think back, depending on how long you've had the allotment, you may well get some idea of what's caused it, even if it was years back.
I think it was Sarah, and I think they've had the allotment since the beginning of the year, so hopefully that sheds some advice for them. Mark's here for half an hour, so we want to crack straight to the phones. Tony is in Bearsted with a very common problem. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Andy.
Explain what you've got, please.
Yeah, I've got a large tree which is very, very close to the house, about 2 metres away from the house. I think the tree is either a Gladitsia or something like that. Anyway, I'm not an expert, obviously, on trees, but basically it's about a 18-inch trunk, and it's, as I say, it's only a couple of metres from the house, and sort of held back by a retaining wall, which is about 1 metre high. That wall is now bulging, and I've got to have it taken down, and the question is really, does it all come down in one go? When should it come down? And, root grinding, all that sort of thing.
And just give us an idea of how tall it is, Tony.
30 or 40 foot.
30 or 40 foot. All right, Mark, let's start you off with that one.
As to when it comes down, you can take it down any time. But, I mean, obviously, it needs to be done professionally, because if it's close to the house, you need to have somebody that's obviously got the right insurance and got the right equipment. And then with regard to the stump coming out, you probably need to take the wall out first. If it's bulgy, it's going to need to be repaired anyway.
Sure.
In which case, it may well come out with a mini excavator or even a stump grinder if the access is good.
Yeah, I did get a guy to come and have a look at it, and but what he didn't seem too clear about to me was, this thing about heave when things come out like that. Should it come out in one go, or obviously it's going to look ugly, I would admit, if it's taken out, because it's a lovely tree, and we've had it's going, so we don't really want it to go at all. But
they're very nice trees. I mean, with regard to heave and substance, that all depends on the subsoil type. I mean, obviously clay soil is the one that it causes substance heave, and you'd need to find out what the soil content is. If it's heavy clay or a light clay or a medium clay, that would have an impact on taking a tree out or leaving a tree there. So you need to try and find out somewhere from a surveyor or from the local authority if there's experience of what the soil type is in your area, and then it may be required to be a staged program of takedown to minimise the effects of heave or possible heave if you've got a clay soil.
What's the stage program?
You might want to reduce the crown initially, and then possibly pollard it, reduce it down again, then reduce it, and finally take it out over a sort of 2-3 year cycle, just to lessen the impact of the soil water moisture content increasing once the tree's gone.
All right,
yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, fine. So that's only if it's a clay soil, is it?
Yeah, only if it's a clay soil. You need to find out what type of clay soil it is, because it might impact on the removal process.
Carol in Essex has a similar problem. Carol, I hope that's useful to you as well. Tony, thank you very much indeed for your call. How many quotes would you advise people to get? I would
always say 2 or 3, or speak to the local authority, because they know of the good contractors and they also know of the bad contractors in the area. So first protocol will always be the local authority. Speak to the tree officer. He will be able to tell you whether or not the tree's got a conservation area status around the area or a tree preservation order. So speak to the local authority first, and then go to the Yellow Pages or the trade press. It's very timely that you're here, Mike, because there's been a bit of press recently in a television programme about rip-off tree surgeons in one part of Kent in particular. You've just described how people can find someone reputable. Yeah, I would always request a tree surgeon. I would never allow somebody to cold call and door knock. If they're going to do that, ask to see references, ask to see insurances, certificates. They're not going to show it to you. They'll run a mile. If they're cold calling, just say thank you very much, but I've got quotes, and I'll speak to the local tree officer. That may well just deter them, and they'll run a mile. So yeah, it is a problem.
The reason that I laughed is that maybe about 4 years ago now, we had somebody come round where I live, and they said, "Oh, that acer of yours needs topping." And I said, "Oh, do you think so?" He said, yeah, it's getting too big. I said, "Well, for a start, it's a liquid amber, and secondly, I'm going to take your number." And then there was just smoke as they went down the road, Morning all, says Doreen in Whitfield on the email today. I have a large, she says, bigger than my house tree. She says, I think it's a silver birch, white bark, which seems to peel. It's droopy at the tip, very fine branches carrying smallish leaves. It's split into a V at the base, and on one side of the V there's no leaves for a couple of seasons. Actually not a lot of leaf on the other side as well. Situated by a fence, which is at its back. It's quite near. She says, I think it may be dead on one side. She says, what to do? Mark? Get a tree surgeon round. It does sound as though there's a bit of decay or structural weakness at the base, with no leaf on one side of the tree. That side may be completely dead, and that stem may be affecting the stability of the other stem. So I would go in the local trade and find a local tree surgeon, speak to the Dover District Council, I think you're under at Whitfield there, and ask their advice. They would come out and give you free advice on what your next step would be. We'll speak to Russell in Canterbury and Richard in Mepham in a moment here on Radio Kent.